Hey guys, in this video we're going to be going over the Protection Warrior and Wrath. This is going to be a gearing guide, more like a stat guide. And we're going to go through each of the stats, which stats are going to be, improving going into Wrath of the Lich King with the stats you want to go for, the stats you might want to avoid. And of course, kind of some ideas on what you should be looking for when it comes to gearing up for a pre-raid, gearing up for your first raids that you enter, and then moving into farm. Also going to be covering what kind of stats you're looking for when you're going for dungeon tanking or just tanking raid trash in general. Before we get into it, I'd appreciate it if you checked out my Twitch in the description below. Give me a follow there, it really helps, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right, let's start. Stats of the Prot Warrior. Up first, we've got stamina. Stamina is insane. Stamina is your most important stat. It's not even close. The reason you really want stamina is because it gives your healers time to save you. It increases the window, the amount of total damage you can absorb without needing a heal. And that's really important because healers are super broken in Wrath. You're never going to hear a healer complain to you like, oh man, you didn't have enough avoidance. So over the course of a long fight, I had to spend a lot of mana. That's like super rare. And mana issues are a lot less common than your tank dying too quickly for the healers to heal you. Always, 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 give yourself the best chance to live through one shots, live through those mechanics. Because again, the healers are so strong in Wrath. They're going to save you. You just need to give them a chance. You need as much stamina as you can, especially on progression. When you're first entering a new raid, as much stamina as you possibly can get. No other stat comes close. So stamina. Armor, not much to say. As a warrior, you're not necessarily just like stacking armor rings or stacking armor cloaks. By and large, just make sure you're using plate. Could be something when you're comparing two items. You could say, oh, this one's got a lot more armor. That could factor into your decision on which one to use, but typically not going to be the main thing you're looking for on items. Just make sure you're wearing plate armor, because in Wrath, thread is a lot easier to hold. Thread is much less of an issue. You don't need to use leather or mail in Wrath of the Lich King to try and increase your threat. Not necessarily something worth doing unless you're in a very, very strange optimized setting, which most of us players are not going to be in. Next, defense. And I'll talk about defense and resilience. So defense increases your chance to block, dodge, and parry, but it also reduces your chance to be crit. That reduced chance to be crit is very important, because if you get crit by a boss, obviously you're very likely to die, especially during an enrage. Now, the resilience reduces chance to be crit. It has some other effects, but the main thing is for PvE, for raiding, is going to be reducing the chance to be crit. Between your resilience and your defense, you want a 5.6% chance to reduce your critical strikes. So you need 5.6% critical strike reduction to not bit crit. So you just need to add those two numbers together. 4.68 plus 0.92 for me would add up to 5.6. So I'm good here. But if you want to go just on defense, you need 540 defense to be crit immune. You're going to notice, though, that it is really, really difficult to get crit immune as a warrior in Wrath of the Lich King in early gear. And the reason for that is they removed your defense talent. You used to have a defense talent like on the first row. It's gone. It doesn't exist. So you need a lot more defense from gear to make up for that when you're fresh level 80. And it's really tough, honestly. Even with the template having a defense item in every single slot except the trinkets, you still don't have enough defense. And this current set is using a resilience enchant, a defense rating enchant. It's got resilience gem, resilience shoulders, PvP shoulders, and resilience gem on the legs. So you can see it's using so much resilience, so much defense gemming, enchanting, just to get crit immune. So it's actually really tough to get crit immune right at the start. So that's your first priority when you hit level 80. When you're preparing for a raid, is you're going to get crit immune, and you're going to look to defense and resilience for that. So defense is a very good stat in Wrath. It's better in 3 ways. So the one we just talked about is that you really struggle for crit immunity. So defense is really good for that. Also, it's not as bad of an issue when it comes to threat to have a bunch of avoidance, because shield specialization gives you 100% chance to gain 5 rage whenever you block, dodge, or parry, which is very good because now you are no longer struggling with rage if you avoid too many attacks in a row. Obviously, getting hit by the boss would give you a lot more rage than a 1 dodge or 1 parry in this case, but it's still, the 5 rage really adds up, especially in AoE. It's so much better. It really makes avoidance builds a lot more viable, especially in a dungeon setting. So that's huge. The third reason defense is even better as well is because threat's just much less of an issue. So defensive items are just going to be much better because threat's easier to hold, so you can focus more on survivability. Next, we're going to talk about dodge and parry. So dodge versus parry. If you gem something like dodge or gem something like parry, you're going to see that you gain more avoidance from gemming dodge per, gem that you use. But parry gives you that chance to swing back faster. So when you're looking at just stats, 1% chance to parry is better than 1% chance to dodge. But dodge rating is better than parry rating because you get more avoidance from it. So that is how those stats work. Again, you're never really going to look at an item and say, man, I love this item because it has a bunch of dodge and parry as the first thing you're looking at. You're typically going to say, wow, this item has a ton of stamina and it's got good avoidance and threat is not a concern. So I'm going to go for these stats. So dodge and parry, again, very good, but stamina is going to be more important, and defense, especially early, is going to be a bigger indicator of whether or not you're going to use the item than the dodge or the parry. But remember that these stats are much, much better in Wrath because threat is less of an issue. Next, we have block. Of course, we have block rating and we have block value. So block rating is a really weird stat. What block rating does is it increases your chance to block, obviously. Now, the problem with block rating is you've got this ability called shield block. When you press it, it increases your chance to block by 100%. So any block rating on your character becomes immediately worthless. And it's only a 40-second cooldown, and it lasts 10 seconds. So that's you're going to have this up a decent amount of time. That's pretty unfortunate that your shield blocker rating becomes completely useless. There's not really anything that's going to help convert some of that shield block rating into anything really more useful for you. So shield block rating is a stat that is kind of a luxury. It's something you could use if the item has it, it's there. But it's never going to be something you're really going to be building around because when you press your shield block, it's worthless. And there's a decent chance that, it's just RNG stat, right? You get shield block rating, it's not guaranteed to help you. Then we get the block value. Block value is better for a couple of reasons. Number one, when you pop your shield block, you're guaranteed to block every attack, at least block, dodge, or parry, or he'll miss. So you're guaranteed to get a lot more blocks when you pop shield block. Also, your shield block value is doubled when you press shield block, although it doesn't count your shield itself. So you're going to see here, I have, if you look at my block, I have 952 block, and about 200 of it is coming from our shield. So we should expect our block to go up by about 700. So when I press this, you're going to see, looks like it went up by about 700. So that is why you might see that your block doesn't exactly double. But that makes block value good. And then obviously your shield slam is going to do increased damage based on your shield block value. When you press shield block, that's going to make your shield slam hit harder. And then also you can run a glyph called Glyph of Blocking, which increases your block value. And this applies to your first shield slam you use as well. So you have a lot of things that increase your shield block value. Also in Wrath the Lich King, you just get a lot more, and in pre-patch, you get a lot more block value. Even the items from TBC get buffed in terms of how much block value you get. So you're going to see a lot more block value in items. So yeah, block value is a really nice stat. Again, your number one priority is always stamina. And you're never going to want to sacrifice, especially early into a phase. You don't want to sacrifice stamina for a bunch of block value. But it is a nice way to increase your threat and your survivability at the same time on a boss. Something to mention when we're talking about blocking in general is a few talents. So damage shield is going to reflect damage back to enemies equal to your block value, 20% of your block value. Now, this is not something that's going to hold threat on its own. It's a nice thing to add in. But do not just build an entire shield block value set just for a dungeon, unless you're soloing or something. But if you're actually doing a group dungeon with people, they're not going to sit and wait 10 seconds for enemies to start attacking you and start, doing thorns damage back. A lot of your threat is going to be still coming from your thunderclap and your shockwave, just think of this as a little extra threat. It's not the primary thing that's causing you to hold threat, because it's all about snap threat. It's all about threat at the beginning of the pull. So I wouldn't think of block value as a stat for dungeons or for threat in trash pulls, but think of it more of a single target threat stat and a stat that's going to help you reduce the damage you're taking. We also have critical block. Critical block gives you a 60% chance when you block to block double the normal amount. So this is another thing that is going to make your block value even better, and would make block rating something you may be interested at certain points. But again, block rating is more going to be a stat that's going to reduce the damage you take over a long fight and help with healer mana, which is typically not something that's necessary. And early into a tier, you're never really going to want to itemize a ton of block rating unless you're planning for a specific fight, which has a lot of little hits from ads. But unless you're planning around taking the lowest amount of damage possible from a lot of little things, block rating is not going to be the best still. But those are those stats there. Those are your defensive stats. Now we're going to talk about the offensive stats. So like I keep mentioning, threat is much less of an issue on bosses. So all of these stats are way less valuable than you're used to coming from something like Burning Crusade. We still have hit rating. We still have expertise. Hit rating, you want 8% chance to hit on a boss. And for expertise, you want a total amount of expertise to reduce the chance to be dodged and parried by 14% if you never want to get parried by the boss. But 6.5% is the soft cap. So that's what you're aiming for there. When it comes to the rest of your character, of course, hit rating and expertise is the best way on a single target boss to increase your threat. I really don't get trapped, guys. Do not gem hit rating early. Do not gem expertise early. Do not itemize strictly for these items. These are great stats for farm. These are not the stats that you need your first week of Naxxramas, your first week tanking a hard boss. Threat, trust me, threat is so much less of an issue in Wrath. Do not go for these stats until you are confident that you're tanky enough to live through the encounter. And so especially early Nax, and then going into Ulduar as well, if you have to lose a little bit of hit or expertise to gain a big amount of stamina, definitely do it, because you just need to be as tanky as possible for these bosses. Important to always remember to is play to the strengths and weaknesses of your class. Warriors already have good threat. What you're worried about is dying. You're worried about being squishy. So you want to make sure you're gearing your character right to account for its weaknesses and go for a lot of stamina instead of getting caught up on these stats. So I would say typically you're not really going to be looking for strength, crit, and attack power. These are not stats you're really going to be looking for when it comes to raid tanking, when it comes to single target tanking. You don't need a lot of these stats to hold threat. It's just going to end up costing you avoidance and stamina. Important to remember, another thing with avoidance, revenge does an insane amount of damage. But you need to block, dodge, or parry for it to be active. And so if you're running a bunch of attack power, a bunch of damage stats, and you're not getting your revenge 100% uptime, it's important to mention that avoidance would increase your threat in that situation. So it's not like when you're running a bunch of avoidance, nothing is helping your threat. Shield block value is going to help increase your shield slam damage. Avoidance gives you revenge procs. You're still going to have increases in threat by going tanky. If you go for just these offensive stats, it's really only going to be best in trash and dungeon situations. So attack power and strength are going to be nice because your thunderclap and shockwave are increased by attack power. Your revenge is increased by attack power as well. So all of these AoE abilities, of course your cleave as well, they're all going to benefit from strength and attack power. So those are the stats you're going to want to go for when it comes to AoE tanking, when it comes to snap threat, when it comes to trash, but you don't need them for single target tanking. Of course, we got some other primary stats as well. You've got armor pen as well. Something to mention with armor pen, you're pretty much never going to get enough armor pen that it's really going to be that great for you to stack. So especially because we're going to be using a lot more defensive items in Wrath, unless you're going for some set about doing your personal damage. But this is how I look at personal damage. When it comes to Wrath of Lich King, 95% of us will not care about our personal damage in a raid. We care about threat. So if increasing our threat on like trash is something we can do that'll help the raid, that is something beneficial. But when it comes to like single target, We're really more interested in having enough threat to hold the boss and then just going full mitigation. There are going to be those outliers, those 5% of players that are looking to speedrun, that are looking to do crazy stuff. They may be more interested in some of these stats like armor pen, and but it's not something that your average player really. We're not going to be stacking any armor pen. We're not going to do anything crazy like that. Our gear sets are going to look pretty defensive, except for trash in dungeons, and in that case, we can opt for more strength for AOE threat. All right, agility, just something to mention. Obviously, it gives you dodge, it gives you crit, gives you armor. Agility is pretty good. A lot of your items are not going to have agility because pretty much all tank items come with strength now. But any agility that you do get is certainly fine. But yeah, that is pretty much all the stats. I didn't cover haste. Haste, can help you smooth out rage a little bit if you get some more haste. But a lot of times you're going to have plenty of rage from getting hit by hard bosses. Haste can help you squeeze out some more cleaves. Haste is an okay stat. It's certainly fine. Definitely not going to be a stat that I am ever going to prioritize in really any situation, because single target tanking, I don't need haste for threat. When it comes to AoE, I'm all about increasing the damage of my Thunderclap, increasing the damage of my Shockwave and Revenge. That's all out strength. Not worried about haste as much. Now, one last little comment on crit. Crit's going to be a little worse than you think. First of all, not every build is necessarily going to play Impale anymore because you don't necessarily need the threat. So that's one thing about crit. Another thing about crit is a lot of your abilities come with a very high base crit chance because of your talents. You can see 15% crit on a bunch of your abilities here. You go down the list, your Shield Slam has an additional chance to crit. This gives your Devastate an increased chance to crit. Almost every ability you're going to press has an increased chance to crit. So that makes your critical strike chance does not synergize with already high crit. Strength would synergize with already high crit chance, right? Because crit doesn't synergize with crit, if that makes sense. It just makes crit a little bit worse than you're used to because we already have a decent amount of base crit. So that's pretty much it for the stats. Again, just to recap what you're going to be going for. As a Prot Warrior, going into Naxxramas, first priority, stamina. First priority, stamina. Second priority, crit immunity. Third priority, stamina. Fourth priority, stamina. Stamina. Be crit immune, and then go for stamina. If you're trying to get crit immune, try and reach crit immunity in any way that gives you the highest amount of stamina left over, right? Just make sure you check your defense and your resilience. You need 5.6% chance not to be crit. After that, just go for some avoidance. Stamina, defense, dodge, parry, maybe some block value. That's what we want week 1 going into Nax. As we're transitioning into farm, we're looking to acquire hit and expertise. Hitting the expertise soft cap, hitting hit cap. These are going to be big ways to increase our threat. It's going to give us consistency in our openers. We don't necessarily need a lot of help holding threat, but we do want consistency so we don't miss all of our attacks at the start of a fight. And as people are pumping more and more on farm, you want to make sure that you have that safe opener for everyone to go off. But you still want to keep your stamina high. So on farm, you're looking for stamina, crit immunity, of course, and then hit rating and expertise. You can look for some shield block value as well as you're going into farm. When it comes to dungeons, you're looking for strength. Stamina is a lot less important. You can get a lot more flexible with your gearing. You can go a lot lower in health, especially as you're getting more geared, especially with a geared healer you trust. You can go way down on stamina. You don't even necessarily have to be crit immune all the time. Typically being crit immune is going to be safe, but if you're really not taking any damage, you can really just live on the edge in these dungeons. Go for a bunch of strength. Go for a bunch of critical strike after strength first, then stuff like critical strike. And you're going to be doing a lot of snap threat, doing a lot of damage, and having a lot of fun in there. And just remember, you can use Shockwave to protect yourself. You have a lot of defensives on short cooldowns now in dungeons. So if you play very aggressively in dungeons, it's uncommon that you're going to like be in a situation where you're gonna die so often in a dungeon that you don't have something like a 2-minute shield wall, or if you don't take the talent, you've got shield wall on a 4-minute cooldown, last stand on a 3-minute cooldown, you've got shield block on a 40-second cooldown. It's pretty hard to die in a dungeon, if you're paying attention and your healer is paying attention. But that's why you can go so aggressively. Don't forget you have enraged regen, which is also, pretty good in dungeons as well. Typically, you're going to die a little bit slower than in a raid, so it's even better there. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. Stay tuned in the, I guess soon future. I'll release some lists for phase 1, going into the Nax, a gear set that you want to look at, and then a phase 1 BIS list as well. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe if you want to see that. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.